interesting. We're gonna just do this. So it must be computer side. Well, the quality's pretty good. All right. We just went live on my phone. You'll need to access that from the channel page. Sorry for the inconvenience, everyone, but we're here. And I just realized my phone's probably lower on battery, so we're going to have to run out to my car and get my phone charger. As we go ahead and flip this. Orientation is locked. Rotate device back. All right. Officially the most convoluted stream to date. But again, what I'm going to do is so we can jump right into things, I'm going to let Kim introduce himself. I'm going to go run and get my phone charger, which is in my car. And we're going to be good to go. So I'm going to close this other one out here. I guess we'll stare at the Roach Crossing YouTube live stream YouTube channel page. All right, go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm going to go get my phone charger. And we'll do it this way.
I'm locking the door when he goes out. He's not getting back in. It's raining here, so that'll actually be a bonus.
And he's barefoot.
And he's barefoot. I'm Kim Wismann, and I'm a geezer. Back. Oh, his dad gave up. What I wanted to talk to you about tonight is the value of getting into the field, what it can mean to you, how to get there, what to do when you get there, and some tips about staying safe and maybe coming back alive. No promises on that last one. The thing about getting into the field, actually getting out, is that you get to see how the real world really works. And it's very, very different from anything you can possibly get on the internet, possibly get from books or any other experience. It's completely immersive, as you can see.
All right.
And it can be transformative. But for a lot of people, it can seem pretty daunting. And I know that a great many people live in cities, and they're not retired, so they don't just have the luxury of standing up and walking anytime they want. And when you have to get out on a schedule, you've got to make a plan, you've got to set aside time, sometimes you've got to set aside money depending on how far you have to go, but it's worth it. People who get out into the field get to see their target organism, they get to see the habitat it lives in, they get to see how it lives, and it deepens their experience, it deepens their understanding of their favorite critter, and inevitably it broadens anyone's perspective as they fit their pet organism into the greater matrix of life on Earth. You can't get out in the wild, at least not repeatedly, without starting to fit yourself into the structure of life on Earth. You find out where your thread of the tapestry fits in. And for people that let it really get inside them, they can find themselves out there. There's really nothing quite like it. You'll know that you've become a person who really gets out and is really understanding it when you're coming home and you're starting to feel disappointed. You've driven out from a wild place, and as you drive back into your artificial life, you start seeing pavement, other cars, wires overhead, strip malls, neon, and you're coming home to the things you need to live, but there's a little bit of regret. And now you're a wild person. And where your heart really is out in the real world, where things are healthy and strong, and they know how to take care of business. Now here in Michigan, you can get some pretty good wild fun. To back up, Michigan's not exactly wild anymore. It's been so picked over that it's not even second growth, it's more like fifth growth forest. But you can get out and see some fairly decent woodlands and meadows and good diverse habitat in places like the Pinckney Recreation Area, which is one of my favorite stomping grounds. So I'm going to talk a minute about the Pinckney Recreation Area, but we're going to talk about the rest of the country to some degree.
Let me do a quick chat check and see. Okay, we got live chat and whatnot turned on. All right. So, yeah, I guess for some background context for Kim and I, Kim is the person who originally got me to haul my butt out to Arizona and gave the original guidebook and gave tips and collecting tips and told us where to go and what to look for while we were there. Chris Snyder wants to go into the field in my yard. I guess you could consider it. I mean, Will's actually found 2 different types of pseudoscorpions out there, so it's not the worst place to go. There's a guidebook, Tennyson asks. That is something that you can touch on, because that, although it was catered to sort of our group's interests, is still something that has a lot of things that are a lot of other people's interests too. Maybe something that I could provide if you decided to make it available again, or a PDF or some other copy. It seems there may be some other people who could use that information if you wanted to make it available. But anyways, with that sort of being said, and moving on to your next talking point, whatever that may be, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them. We will get to them. Again, the phone kind of doesn't show comments for terribly long, but long enough that that I can usually catch them, and I'll try and keep them up here and bring them up where applicable. But if you have a question that hasn't been answered yet, feel free to ask it again, and we will be able to get to it. So, but as you were, as I cater to this nosy boy here.
To Kyle's point about his yard, Kyle has spent a lot of time returning his yard to a semi-wild state. He's planted a lot of native plants in great profusion. And one of the how great a diversity of insects you can get in the middle of an urban setting just by planting a diversity of native plants. So that's probably noteworthy, and you can really have a pretty good time in your own yard once it matures, if you do a really good job with the native plants. But back to the Pinckney Recreation Area, one of the points I wanted to make about it is that if you look at a satellite image of the Midwest, you'll see that most of it is farmland, and it looks pretty brown. It's all gridded and plowed fields, but there is a single schmear of green running from roughly the town of Milford to roughly the city of Jackson. And that is the Pinckney Recreation Area, and it is the only green smear between central Ohio and the northern lower peninsula.
Should also mention this is all in Michigan.
It's all in Michigan. So the thing about getting out into the field is you've got to put in the work. You don't just push a button and you're standing there. You have to get in the car. You have to know where you're going. You have to drive out. You have to get out of the car. You have to find your heading and pretty much get off the trail. And now we're kind of getting into the weeds, because now you're in the weeds. And pretty much anywhere in the wild, you need to defend yourself against insect-borne diseases. So you can use repellent sprays to protect yourself from biting insects like deer flies and mosquitoes. But you need to be defended against ticks, because ticks can change your life, and not in a good way. And the best way to defend against ticks is to treat your clothes with permethrin. There's a ton of online information about treating your clothes with permethrin. Sounds terrible until we got to the weeds. Since I'm about 300 years old,
Roughly.
my distance vision is still pretty good, but my close vision has deteriorated. So, geese are cheaters. Now, Kyle mentioned going out west, and one of the great things about Arizona is that it's still true wilderness. True wilderness is places where people haven't changed it. And you can get out there in the west and see places that people have never changed. It's never been logged, it's never been plowed, it's never been mined. And as a matter of fact, the places that we go, there's jaguars and mountain lions and bears. Oh my. So to get to the west, a person can fly, which I don't recommend, because you really can't take a lot of gear with you on the airplane. It's really expensive, and you're going to be pretty limited. If you fly out and you rent a car, it's not like you're going to drive from Tucson to New Mexico to enjoy some side trip. But if you've got the time and you're willing to put in the effort, driving to Arizona takes a codger like me about 4 days, and a young person full of juice like Kyle about 20 minutes. When I was younger, I would drive through the night, and I could get out to Arizona about 2.5 days. And the last time Kyle went out west, he would text me and say, "Oh, we're done with Colorado now," and I thought he just left that morning. So depends on your stamina, but you can get out to the area. And in Arizona, in southeastern Arizona, there are pretty much more different kinds of insects than almost any other place in the world. And there are more different kinds of butterflies, more species of butterflies than anywhere except southern Florida. So it's really worth getting out there. And that was the thing that Kyle had wanted to do for a long time. He heard about Arizona. He's seen the pictures of the sheet at night with the ultraviolet light on it, just covered with moths. It looks like the tropics. But to someone from the east who has never been there, never been that far out, it can seem like going to the moon. It seems almost insurmountable. But Kyle's been out there a number of times, and he can tell you that it's becoming routine. After you've done it, it's really not so bad, and it's worth doing. It can really be transformative. So one of the favorite places to go is someplace like Madera Canyon. And Madera Canyon is south of Tucson in the Santa Rita Mountains. Madera Canyon is a fairly tightly managed wild area. The Forest Service has authority over Madera Canyon that it doesn't have over other places. And but you still can collect insects for personal use on national forest land. And that brings me to a point about regulation. I'm so old that I remember a world where there were hardly any regulations. You could go where you want and do what you wanted, kind of, sort of. You still couldn't trespass on people's private property, but nobody cared about insects. The Endangered Species Act wasn't even created until 1973, when I was 20 years old.
Oh, geez.
He's starting to feel it now.
Say, jokes aside, that really puts some perspective into things.
Yes. Well, you want to put perspective into things. The last Civil War veteran died in my lifetime, and I remember the news flash. So
the pseudoscorpions are, I will be there.
There was that time when we were a lot more free to do what we wanted, and those were my times. But there are regulations now, and it's not a bad idea to know that there are, and not a bad idea to know some of them. For instance, if wildlife, and wildlife is everything that has DNA, is unlawfully taken and it's transported across any federally regulated jurisdictional boundary, which includes state lines, national forest boundaries, national park and national monument boundaries, and the boundaries of BLM land, the federal government does have the authority to regulate it, and unlawfully taken, held, possessed, or transported wildlife across any federally regulated boundary could be prosecuted under the Lacey Act. So you do want to be mindful that you are obeying any regulations. Good news is the Forest Service does not have management authority over wildlife other than unlawfully taken wildlife in violation of a state or federal statute. Wildlife is the property of the state, and in Arizona, terrestrial invertebrates are not managed unless they're state protected. There's one or two, but they're really hard to find and they're fairly boring, so you're not missing out. The Forest Service can regulate certain activities on Forest Service land, such as placing equipment, especially if it's going to be left behind and unattended. Now, you can bring ultraviolet lights to place at night and if you tend your sheet. But if you set out an ultraviolet light trap and then go to bed to check it for the next morning, you would need to get something called a special use permit, which is free. There's no charge for it, but you do have to apply for it. And if you're in the Madera Canyon area, you'd apply to the Tucson office and call the Tucson office and they'll walk you through it. It's, as I say, there's no charge for it if it's for personal use. The fun you can have out there in a good year is incomparable. There's really nothing like it in the East. And one of the reasons for that is that in the West, invertebrates emerge all at once during the rainy season if the rainy season is working. If the rainy season is dry, you get nothing. But if the rainy season is working, if it's a decent or good rainy season, they all pop out at once and you can spend a week out there and see a great diversity of species in great numbers, and it's really a party. I've lived in Arizona for 30 years, and I did that for 30 years, and really kind of sucked the life out of most of the places I went. And we would have years where the sheet was hanging. There was so much stuff on it, and we'd have years where we got absolutely nothing. Couldn't even squeeze a mosquito bite out of that place. Speaking of heat and being safe.
Really quick, speaking of mosquitoes, we had a question regarding permethrin-treated clothing and how that might affect an invertebrate collection if you came back, into your house with permethrin on your clothing. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts, I guess, on washing or dealing with clothing after it's been treated? Any thoughts on that?
I do have thoughts.
Okay.
Permethrin treated clothing, once permethrin dries, it's a contact poison. So there's no vapor. You can wear your permethrin treated clothing around your insect collection, although why you would go to the trouble of treating clothing you only wear into the field and then wearing it at home, that I don't know. But if that's your bag, you're safe around your invertebrates unless you let them walk on you, and they will hate you for it. Briefly, until they die. Permethrin treated clothing can be washed, and then it's best hung to dry. Once the permethrin binds to the fabric, it doesn't wash off very easily, but it can be mechanically broken away from the fabric and putting it in the dryer to tumble. It's the mechanical tumbling that spoils the permethrin treatment more so than the washing in the washing machine. Permethrin is promised to, if it's properly applied, permethrin has been promised to last about 3 to 5 washings. I don't particularly trust it. And since, as I say, ticks can be extremely dangerous, I treat several articles of clothing and then I'll wear one after the other into the field and then wash them perhaps once and then retreat them. I just had a question. How do you deal with collecting if you're wearing a contact poison? Old collectors like me don't collect live insects. They do not survive the collection process. We make dead collections, series of dead things, like the thousands of dead butterflies and dead beetles that I have in my personal collection. Museum collections, that's the old school collector. Some dog nose in here. And then...
If you never wash your field clothes, you would not need to reapply the permethrin?
If you never wash your field clothes, it's likely nothing is going to come near you. I was sent out on a photo assignment one time, and the people who wanted the photo wanted a photo of a desert iguana. And they waited too long. They waited until it was summer. Desert iguanas are easier to photograph when they emerge early in the season. They're much more approachable. I tried to get them the photograph anyway, but it was really, really hot in Arizona. And when I came home, I smelled so bad that my dog sniffed me, made a face, and stepped back. I don't know how bad you have to smell to scare away your dog, considering that they sniff each other's butts and eat all kinds of weird stuff and roll in any dead thing they can find, but I smelled so bad the dog wanted nothing to do with me. So if you don't ever wash your clothes after treating them with permethrin, this may be your experience as well. Also, you will quickly be friendless. But yeah, if you're just out a little while and you're still comfortable wearing the clothes and you don't need to reapply, and you can get an entire summer, I would think, out of one outfit, one treated outfit. Permethrin really does work. When I've been in the field, I've occasionally looked down and seen a tick try to walk on a permethrin treated trouser cuff, and its legs curled up and it just fell off. Well, it wasn't dead, but the permethrin really irritated it. So permethrin treating your clothing really does protect against ticks. Still need to do a tick check in case something landed on your head. I am more so wondering for a 3-day trip where I can't wash. Sure, do that.
Put it in a plastic bag.
Yes, you could just be careful that when you touch stuff that you aren't letting it touch your clothing. You know, if you're collecting live specimens, just make sure, just be careful that you don't let things touch your clothing. So.
I'm not sure how you would use your clothing to collect a live insect. You put like a stranglehold on it or something. You don't really put a hammerlock on a grasshopper. You use your hands or implements. So, does it work on chiggers is the question. Yes, it does. It works on any invertebrate. Actually,
ticks out here.
Interestingly enough, it is not, once it's dry, it's not harmful to cold-blooded vertebrates. Permethrin is the active ingredient in proventamite, the popular snake mite treatment.
Collect the live ticks.
Chris Snyder says collect live ticks. If that's your thing, then don't treat with permethrin, and yeah, just kind of do a tick drag with your leg. Someone said, surely not amphibians. I don't think I'd handle an amphibian with permethrin. The moist body might absorb it, and that would be the end of your amphibian. But dry things like reptiles can tolerate contact with permethrin. I'm pretty sure proventamite warns against treating anything that amphibians will come in contact with. Also warns against treating in any condition that where the cage is kept moist, because it remoistens the permethrin, and when it's moist, it can be more penetrating. But permethrin is your friend for protecting against ticks. Biting insects, probably just, you still need to spray all the other parts, your hands or whatever, if you want to keep the mosquitoes away.
Which circles us back to, we were talking about mosquitoes. Sheet on rainy season, it could be good, you have a full sheet, and some years it could be so bad that you won't even get a mosquito bite. That's where we were headed next.
Well, to be fair, you can hardly get a mosquito bite in most places in Arizona because there are no biting insects in most places in Arizona, which is another real treat of the West. It's too dry. Even the deer flies out there really don't feed on humans, although it can be kind of unnerving to have them land on you until they realize their mistake. but there's no mosquitoes in Madeira Canyon that I've ever found. There can be a lot of mosquitoes in places that have puddles. So if you go to Arizona, though, here's some tips about where to go and things to see. Madeira Canyon is a beautiful place. It is Forest Service land. There's only one campground, and because the canyon receives so much use, camping is restricted to that campground. In areas that are a little more spread out, you can camp anywhere in the national forest unless there are fire restrictions. In the Chiricahua Mountains, which are several hours away, in Cave Creek Canyon, camping is restricted to campgrounds, but once you get out of Cave Creek Canyon, the entire Chiricahua Mountains is national forest, and you camp anywhere in there if you don't mind being eaten by bears.
30 minutes. Oh, it's Ben. Ah, crap, the comment faded. We're going to have to... It's okay.
The comment was that someone said that there were a lot of mosquitoes around Tucson, but he doesn't know where they're coming from. There's a lot of standing water around Tucson because of humans. There are abandoned automobile tires, and they get standing water in them, and mosquitoes will breed. And any mosquito that survives in the West will breed in about 15 minutes. There's a question, have I ever gone to southern Utah? I have not. That causes me to remember a thought about the West. The West is a lot bigger than the East. Arizona is the 5th largest state. Michigan is the 23rd largest state. That's both peninsulas.
Both of them.
Yeah. So there are counties in Arizona the size of the Lower Peninsula. It takes hours and hours and hours to go from between any two desirable places in the West. Driving from Tucson to Madeira Canyon is about 45 minutes. Driving from Madeira Canyon to the Huachuca Mountains is about 2 hours. Driving from Madeira Canyon or Tucson to the Chiricahua Mountains and Cave Creek is about 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And that's on the freeway. Then you get off the freeway and you're driving down this primitive road for God knows how long, assuming that it hasn't been washed out, because we all pray for rain in the rainy season, and then we pay for rain with rained out nights, with rained out campsites, washed out roads, and the threat to life posed by flash floods and lightning. They have these fierce, fierce storms out there that meteorologists call a rain bomb. That should tell you something. Now, Kyle mentioned a book, and one of the comments was, there's a book. When Kyle was going out to Arizona, I was motivated to write a book. Small book, not a novel,
Not a tome.
not a tome, but I wanted to pass on information that I have, what some people call corporate knowledge, the kind of thing you pick up in life that you're not going to read or learn about in a class. And as I get older, the people that I knew that have passed their information on to me, they're all gone. And with them has gone some pretty fun knowledge that I now possess. I didn't want it to vanish from the world, so I'm trying to impart it to the next generation. So I did write Kyle sort of a brief guide, and it had pictures, and some warnings about how to be careful, some reality checks about functioning in the West, functioning in southern Arizona. An example of that is that there's hardly any what you call soil in southern Arizona. Most of it is made of cracked rock. So when you go camping, those little wire tent stakes you buy with the tent are of no use whatsoever. Yes, tribal knowledge, someone mentions.
Tribal knowledge, yeah.
Very well. I'm not a member of a tribe, but you can call it that if you want. So when you set your tent stakes, you will need to have gone to Home Depot and buy yourself some 16-penny spikes. That's what you drive into the ground in Arizona, because it's the only thing that's going to bullnose its way through the rocks and be able to set the tent so that the wind won't blow the tent away with you in it. No promises about bears. So I think the book can be adjusted for pretty much anyone. And Kyle suggested we make it available as a PDF, and I've thought about doing that, so I can probably retool it and give it to him, and he can put it on his website.
All right.
So I think that's about all I can think of to just blurt out. Yes, I am the
Are you
Kim
the
that
Kim?
sent... One person asks, am I the one that sent him to look for Paracatalpa puncticalis? And I am.
Tip number 2, always go into every body of water you encounter in Florida. Depends on what context you're offering those tips for.
Perhaps he's trying to eliminate competition.
We had another question earlier from Alan asking, what was one of your craziest experiences out west?
Oh, boy.
Or what was your craziest experience?
You know, it's kind of hard to pick a crazy-est experience.
Mhm.
I do want to mention one thing, though. Something that people can be concerned about is encountering other people who may not be particularly friendly. I've almost never seen any other human out there who was not also an insect collector, and they have always been very friendly, and I've actually made some friends that way. The places I go are not the places that bad people go to do bad things because they don't expect to find anyone there. There's nobody out there except crazy people with insect nets. I was on a road in the Atascosa Highlands, which is south of Tucson, almost to the Mexican border. And there's only one road that runs through those highlands called the Ruby Road. And I hadn't lived in Arizona for a while, so I turned white again. No color at all. And I'm out there with my shorts and my knobby white old geezer knees. And a Border Patrol agent drove by, and they usually stop to ask you what you're doing. And he took one look at me with my butterfly net and those white shiny knees and eyes straight ahead and drove on. And for the rest of the time I was out there, about another 5 days on the Ruby Road, no Border Patrol agent stopped to ask me what I was doing. I think they got on the radio and said, just stay away from him. I think he might be made of cream cheese or something. Might be a chupacabra. I'm not sure. You don't want to take a chance with that guy. But I was at my campsite at twilight waiting to go check lights that I had turned on. You want to turn your lights on at twilight. Stuff flies right at twilight. You don't want to miss it. Some stuff flies later, but there's cool stuff out that flies right at twilight. So get those lights up at about 7:45 if you're out there in July, late July, which is the collecting season and the rainy season. But I was sitting in my campsite, the lights were up, and I was just chilling, and some very large javelina ran through the campsite, inches from me, didn't even pay any attention to me. And at first I was amazed that javelina, which by the way are sort of a wild pig, ran through the campsite, and then my thought was, what might be chasing them? Never did find that out. If there was anything chasing them, I didn't see it. I haven't had any bad encounters with animals, big dangerous animals. I've seen bear, mountain lion, bobcat, all that stuff, but they're always on their way somewhere. My wife was sitting, I have a question here that I'll answer in just a moment. But my wife was sitting on in a chair outside on the front patio of Santa Rita Lodge while I was away doing something buggy, and a mountain lion walked down the road about 150 feet away, owned the canyon, total attitude. So that was a fairly wild experience. And there's another question that I'll go ahead and answer that one. What are the best products for lighting? Interestingly enough, I have a recommendation for a really easy way to get some lights out there. If you want to fly out and you want to bring a lot of gear, go to a website calling itself 100 Candles.
100 Candles.
Surf the website for LED light bases. These are things that people put underneath glass vases, tables at weddings and such to highlight the vases. Some of the LED light bases have UV LEDs. And one of them has, I believe, 24 LEDs in the light base. They run off of AA batteries. They're small and portable, easily fit in your carry-on luggage. And I tried them out, and it turns out they are the perfect spectrum to attract all sorts of insects. Now, they're not that powerful, so you may not get the numbers, but you'll get all the diversity. And this is something that you can just carry in your hands, set on the ground, or hang over a pillowcase in the dark in the forest at night, and attract a lot of insects and have a pretty good time. And then just throw it back in your backpack and out you go, and you don't have to be carrying batteries and long tubes and all this other stuff. Now I've forgotten, what was the first question I wanted to address?
We were talking about what were your craziest experiences or encounters in Arizona, but I think that was the question. That was the next one, was lighting, gear, equipment type stuff.
Lighting and gear. There was another one I wanted to address, but I must apologize for, removing jumping choya. That's the one.
That was it.
That was it.
How could I forget
How
that?
could you forget that? Jumping choya removal. Yes.
Don't touch it.
Yes, there is a way to remove jumping choya. No, I've never used red lights to sneak up on stuff. I attract the stuff to the sheet, and then it's toast. Once it gets clinging to the sheet, staring at an ultraviolet light, it doesn't move anymore. So, how to remove jumping choya? Go online and find yourself some really small needle nose pliers. Jeweler's pliers. That's a good place to start, because you're going to need the power of the grip you can get with a pair of pliers to rip that choya spine out of your flesh. Jumping choya, when it penetrates you, doesn't come out very easily. It causes subcutaneous bruising. It's nasty. And you will feel the pain for a while, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days. It's going to be sore. But you're not just going to get it out with some little forceps or little eyebrow tweezers. You're going to need pliers, and you've got to get it out. You don't want to break it off and leave it in there, because it'll continue to work its way in. Also, really good idea, don't go near it in the first place. Bad thing about the West, no rain, so nothing to cause dry things like cactus spines and thorns to decompose. They accumulate over the centuries and just blow around everywhere. The entire surface of the ground is covered with cactus spines. Don't think you're going to just sit on the ground. Don't put your hands on the ground in the low parts of Arizona. It's not Michigan. There's no happy little soil. There's no happy little grass.
Happy little soil.
There's nothing but pain and death for you sitting on the ground. Ooh, but what if a latabatella with an oot runs into a field of the risk of the cactuses?
I would try to do something.
It's good to have someone with you that you can lay down on the cactus and walk over to catch your bug. And you can tell them that you're their friend until the time comes you need to use them. That's a plan. You can try that out.
You know, with the choya cactus spines, when I was trying to look for stuff in the pack rat burrows, and just attempting to get into, like, even with the long forceps, I still could not get a comfortable angle or means of actually getting into the burrow because of the sheer amount of spines. You're just not safe at any, like, angle getting close to those things. And, like, every time I would try to force myself, I would just, like, start to pull back, like, instinctually, because I didn't want to get stabbed again. But
one of the things that
I think I missed a comment. It'll pop up again. Anything for lucifrons or paraplaneta missionary? We have to have a serious discussion at the end of this live stream. By the way,
Kyle has a mic drop for you.
I have a mic drop. Well, some of them already know about it, but some of them were the ones who ruined and updated me. Simultaneously ruined and made my morning today, telling me that information. But the last thing I want to say really quick on choya is there is a video of me getting stabbed by Choya on the first Arizona trip. You can find it on Will's now defunct YouTube channel, but there's actually surprisingly, I don't know if this makes me sound better or worse, there's surprisingly few Choya videos on YouTube. And I think it's called Idiots Play with Teddy Bear Choya, or Idiots Play with, Alan put the title in. So if you guys want to see an old video of me getting a Choya stuck in my leg, also with Will getting one on his hand and freaking out far more than he needed to for having a little tiny one stuck on his hand versus the giant one stuck in my leg, you can go ahead and watch that. Yeah, Alan, I don't think links, YouTube filters out like actual HTML, www links, but if you just send the video title, people can just look it up and Will can get a bunch of views on that video.
I have to look at it. I haven't seen this. When I wrote Kyle his book, I did an entire page on do not approach or touch Choya. When Kyle got back from his trip, he said, I touched the Choya. he couldn't resist. It just looked so cuddly, but it's not cuddly. There was one fellow who was working on a road crew who got a Choya node stuck to the back of his ankle and didn't know it. He squatted down to do something and stapled his ankle to his butt. And really couldn't get up until someone came.
It really is like stapling, huh?
Yeah. They're horrible. I've had, I think I had one Choya node stuck on me one time, and that was the last time. Someone's asking, are there multiple Choya? The worst one is what's called teddy bear Choya, sometimes also called jumping Choya. It doesn't actually jump, but the nodes break off so easily, people will swear they didn't even go anywhere near them. They did. They just barely touched them and the node broke off, which is how the cactus reproduces. Eventually the node falls to the ground, roots, and a new cactus grows. Someone writes that I've had Choya come up through the bottom of my boot and into my foot. That happens because the Choya spine continues to work its way in. Even leather boots are not a perfect protection against Choya. Choya is kind of a big deal. Cactus spines littered this whole surface of the West. It's kind of a big deal. You want to go out there, you will be so glad you did, but you just have to take care of yourself. You have to bring something to the table to take care of yourself. Wild is not looking out for you. The wild's kind of looking out for you in the east. Everything's been gentled. Most of the big predators have been driven out. Swamps have been drained. There's no more malaria in Michigan. There used to be. So it's been tidied up. In the west, not so much.
Horse crippler cactus. Never heard of that. Oh, you know what was another really, really horrible, awful plant is the it's the sandbur grass.
Yes.
That, honestly,
Goat head.
I think compared to my Choya experience, I would honestly take the Choya over that stuff because it gets stuck in your socks.
Mm-hmm.
It gets stuck and if you don't even know you're like carrying one of it around and you go to like touch something, the spines just go straight. They're so ridiculously sharp and rigid is the other thing.
Woody.
Oh my gosh. I think I've gotten that in Michigan once or twice too.
Yeah, I think we have that here.
But it's not nearly as common as it is out west. But oh man, I hate that stuff so much.
Well, that brings up a point. A lot of the spine plants have spines in Arizona that are woody. People are not used to woody spines in the east. They're a little bit fleshy. I mean, they still poke you, but a rose thorn is a little bit fleshy, especially a young one. There are spines from mesquites in and around Portal that can flatten automobile tires. People out there get flat tires from plant spines. Big, woody plant spines, sharp as a hypodermic needle and as hard as steel. And they flatten automobile tires. So most people out there own some kind of larger vehicle like a truck or an SUV. And when you have a larger vehicle, you have the option of buying something called a 10-ply tire. I don't know what that is. Have they ever been used to commit murder, somebody writes. No, people who murder each other in the West usually just, leave you out to dry up. But yeah, so the western spines are
Yo.
they're pretty tough. But on the page that warns against touching the cholla, there's a photograph I found on the internet of some poor guy whose body was completely covered with cholla nodes. And if Kyle posts that PDF, you folks get to see that guy. I don't even know if he survived. That would be... I don't think I'd want to live. Just give me the bullet and let it end. As a werewolf.
Yeah. All right, so we've covered quite a bit already. I guess a good question is what are some of the live things that you've kept from Arizona when you lived out there? There's one I'm thinking of in particular that you kind of paved the way for.
Yeah, I did.
With the husbandry. I think I'd really like you to bring that up, and any others that you've had experience with.
I think what Kyle is talking about is the giant desert centipede, Scolopendra heros. That's what it was called then. I'm not sure where the taxonomy is on it now, but it's the biggest centipede in the United States. When I lived out west and all my life, I've encountered people who exaggerate the size of things. They talk about garter snakes the size of a car, and a mosquito the size of a dog, and all this stuff, because they got all adrenalized when they saw it. Well, they talk about foot-long centipedes, and I was like, yeah, foot-long centipedes. Well, I'm eating crow because I visited the guy one time who had a Scolopendra heros running around in a 10-gallon aquarium, and as it ran along the front of the aquarium, I measured it, and it was 12 inches long. 12 inches. An American centipede. Some of the biggest centipedes in the world are, 14, maybe 16 inches long, and this is a centipede from Arizona where I camped, on the ground, at times with no tent. And it was a foot long. Now, most of the centipedes that I found were 6 to 10 inches. Really magnificent creatures. And interesting thing about the Scolopendra heros, for many, many years, they would die fairly soon in captivity. About 18 months or so was about all anyone could get out of them. But people were keeping them on a coarse, abrasive substrate. So I got the idea to keep them on a gentler substrate like mulch. Just regular old forest mulch, no coloring, no chemicals, and really thoroughly decomposed mulch, so it's no longer off-gassing like pine or something like that. And it turned out that I was keeping them for 4 or 5 years. And at one point I had, I must have had a dozen of these things in little 2.5-gallon aquariums with screen covers, and the care was almost exactly like the care of a small snake. They had a water dish, they had a cupped piece of bark to hide under, and they just lived on this substrate of mulch. It was fairly gentle stuff, and they liked a bit of moistening every now and then with distilled water. So the mulch wasn't saturated, but it was lightly moist. The thing is that these centipedes are kind of soft-bodied, and their epicuticle is easily scored, and so they'll desiccate. So if you don't want to put anything abrasive in there. So don't use potting soil that has perlite in it or anything like that. Cocoa fiber, cocoa core is okay also. So I published a paper for what was at the time called the Invertebrates in Captivity Conference about how I kept Scolopendra on this gentler substrate, and I had good results. And around that time, zoos that displayed them started having better results. Some of the zoos were in attendance. I don't know that I can necessarily claim credit. They may have figured it out at the same time that I did. But it was around that time that Scolopendra heros started doing better in captivity wherever it was held. So in the event you get your hands on any centipede, you don't want to put it on anything. Oh, someone writes, were you one of the people who kept Arizona mountain king snakes for the first time, or am I thinking of someone else? You could be thinking of someone else. I don't know what you're thinking. But
I had brought those credentials up at one
oh,
point.
you did. Okay.
Yes.
In that case, you're probably thinking of me, and I was one of the first people to successfully routinely breed Arizona mountain king snakes, which I don't understand because the breeding of Arizona mountain king snakes is identical to the breeding of corn snakes. You cull them, you take them out, they breed. Incubating the eggs is no mystery, same as incubating a corn snake egg. I don't know what people were doing wrong in the early days, but one of the things that can happen with people is that sometimes they wind up overthinking something. They get an animal that's really, really precious, and they become concerned that it must need some bizarre care that they haven't divined yet. Often that's not the case. Most equilibrid snakes of North America are very similar. It's not true of all of them, but Arizona mountain king snake care is identical to the care of a corn snake, really. Moving on. So yeah, the Scolopendra became something of an obsession for me, and for several years I really hunted them very aggressively. I did find a few places, a few roads through the desert grasslands where if you got the right weather conditions, you could find several. Most of these roads are also monitored by the Border Patrol, and I was constantly being pulled over by Border Patrol. I've always had good experience with Border Patrol. They've always been friendly and courteous, and I've been friendly and courteous. Sometimes they want to have a look at the car, they shine their flashlight in there. Don't mouth off to a police officer, just asking for trouble. And they're fine, they're just doing their job. But on one night, I got stopped 2 or 3 times, and then I was pulled over by a bus full of Border Patrol agents, and they got out of the bus, and 2 of them asked me to step out of the car in a very formal interview, not really typical of the other encounters, which I did. That's fine, they have that authority. And I stepped out of the car, and they looked me over and asked me a few questions. They seemed very young. The young man was not even shaving yet. And then a more senior agent got out, a woman who had been driving the bus, and came over and said, "Oh yeah, we knew who you were. We've been hearing about you on the radio all night. I just thought it was a good training opportunity." So, glad to be of service, Border Patrol. Someone writes, expect to be pulled over by game and fish.
In Madeira Canyon.
In Madeira Canyon. I do not agree with that. I have never been pulled over by game and fish. But if you're shining a flashlight out the window, it is unlawful in Arizona to hunt wildlife with any artificial light from or mounted on a vehicle of any kind.
That is a good note, and he notes it's more of a recent thing, and it probably has to do with the whole the asshole Madeira Canyon incident from circa 2018.
Oh, Ira. I loved Ira. He was bait. Anyway, one night I was down on my favorite road looking for centipedes, and on the way down I stopped at a Border Patrol checkpoint. When you're going down south, they don't stop you. No one smuggles something towards Mexico. They smuggle things away from Mexico. So on the way down, the Border Patrol agents just sort of waved me through. And they stopped and asked me what I was doing. I told them I was looking for bugs, including centipedes. On the way back up, I had some centipedes, and I had one in a jar on the empty passenger seat next to me. The passenger had been eaten by centipedes, so I just left them there as an offering. And the agent was looking in the car, and we were chatting a little bit, and the checkpoint had a big artificial light. It was a mobile checkpoint, but they had a generator with an artificial light. It was nighttime. There were a lot of pretty big bugs flying around. And I showed the agent the centipede. He's looking at this thing in the jar as if he would really like to throw it like it's a hand grenade, because he was appalled, but he couldn't stop staring at this 10-inch long centipede scratching his legs on the inside of this plastic jar, at which point something large flew down the back of his shirt. That was worth the price of admission. So I got kind of well known by the Border Patrol, but they liked me well enough, and I liked them. So that was, Kyle brought up the animal that What have I kept that's alive? I've also kept vinegaroons. I have kept Jerusalem crickets kind of briefly. I've kept a number of predaceous ground beetles that did pretty well. I kept tiger beetles for a little while that I'd keep alive just to enjoy them. The salpugids. Salpugids didn't really live very long in captivity for me. If there's a trick to keeping salpugids, I never learned it. I never reared anything because I'm a dead bug collector. Someone asked Cicindela species.
Yeah, yes, Tennyson has a Cicindela fascination.
Oh, well.
Kind of as Will has had, and Kai has moved through a couple of times as well.
Well, let's give Tennyson some tips. If you go to Arizona, you can go to the town of Wilcox, that Paris of the Southwest, and you can visit the Wilcox Playa. I urge you to stay on developed roads which have been hard packed. Do not drive your vehicle off a developed road because the playa mud, no matter how hard it may seem in dry weather, if it rains, it's going to turn into shaving cream and you wind up getting stuck there. So the Wilcox Playa has more kinds of tiger beetles than any place else in
Wilcox PTSD from
in America.
Satchel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Double check to make sure the roads are actual roads and not just things that look like roads or may be used as roads occasionally.
Yeah, you'll know the difference between a developed road and a two-track leading out to your doom. And another good place to look for tiger beetles, if you happen to make it all the way over to Portal, and I really hope you do, because Portal is transforming. It's transformationally beautiful. Portal and Cave Creek Canyon on the east side of the Chiricahuas is absolutely breathtaking. But south of Portal is a road called Tex Canyon Road. It's quite a ways south of Portal. Everything in the west is far apart. But if you can get down to Tex Canyon Road, there's a number of good tiger beetles in the flats on either side of Tex Canyon Road also. But it has to have rained on Tex Canyon Road. Raining someplace else does you no good. That's another thing about the West. A lot of this ground-dwelling stuff, it needs the rain to land on it. So bring your cell phone with the weather app and look for the actual rainstorm over the place you want to search, and then go there. And if it's been dry where you want to search, go someplace else. You're wasting your time. Next.
Yeah, I guess if anybody else has any specific questions for Kim, we could get that processed and through now. If anybody else has any other things they would like to inquire or know, spray the area you're at with water.
Spraying where you're at with water won't do it. You need about a quarter of an inch to an inch of rain.
I was gonna say let's see, here's another question from. Yes, that was the Wilcox trip situation. Alan asks about West Texas.
Have I collected in West Texas? I have passed through West Texas, but I generally try to just pass through. I don't have any recommended spots for West Texas. It's just something to survive on your way to Arizona. It's a really wonderful place, and I would actually like to go there, but I haven't so far. Nice bugs around Albuquerque. That's pretty high elevation. But you do get Dynastes granti there. Oh, someone's asking, have I heard of the red milkweed beetles? Yeah, we have those here in Michigan.
I think there's a bunch more species out south and west, but here they're mostly common milkweed. We get the four-eyed.
Yeah.
I can't remember, four-eyed milkweed beetle. I think they all have 4 eyes, but that one's specifically called that.
It's kind of a bright red cerambycid, longhorn beetle. And it's red because it's aposematically colored, because it sequesters all the toxins. Dogbane beetle is a leaf beetle that gets onto dogbane. Beautiful metallic green beetle, one of the more beautiful insects in Michigan. But one of the fun things about Arizona is everything's metallic. You've got 3 kinds of Chrysina that you can get in Madeira Canyon. There's only 4 Chrysina in America, and 3 of them live in southern Arizona. 3 of them in Madera Canyon, 3 of them in the Huachucas, and other than that, you won't get Bayer eye. Bayer eye is restricted to the Santa Ritas and the Machucas in the United States. Bayer eye is a large apple green or satin green Chrysina with purple legs. It's a magnificent thing. Someone says, isn't there a giant longhorn beetle in Arizona that eats from the Palo Verde tree? The Palo Verde beetle is a huge longhorn beetle. Someone asks for tips on Alaus zunianus. I'll answer that in a second when I finish the Palo Verde beetle.
Open a can of bugs here.
Yeah.
Yay.
Palo Verde beetles can be attracted to lights, but other than that, it's kind of hit or miss. If you can find an infested Palo Verde tree, which you can recognize because half the tree will be dead, because the Palo Verde root borer killed the roots on that side of the tree. So half the tree is all brown and dead, and the other half is alive. And there may be Palo Verde beetles there. And the adults will emerge from the ground at night during their emergence period, usually triggered by rain around 4th of July-ish. But it's really hit or miss. I have found Palo Verde beetles because I lived there, so I was kind of embedded. But and I have a gigantic female Palo Verde beetle that I think is probably over 4 inches long. Huge thing. Dead. Should point that out. The dead mounted one is over 4 inches long.
Where was that from? What area?
Phoenix.
Okay.
That one was in Phoenix. I lived in the Phoenix metro area. I never lived in Tucson. I lived in the Phoenix metro area for about 30 years, and I would radiate out to all these different places. As far as collecting Alaus zunianus, I don't really have any good tips. Alaus zunianus is another real hit or miss. It's a large click beetle that, Durabrachus is the Palo Verde root borer. But Alaus zunianus has mostly been collected by people who just stumbled upon them sitting on the trunks of oak trees in the Madrian oak woodland, places like Madera Canyon. And there's a question, what's your favorite bug in Michigan? Question is for both of us. My favorite bug in Michigan. That's a tough one.
It is tough.
One of my, there's just too many favorites. I like the dung beetles, though. I had very good luck collecting Phineas vindex. Beautiful dung beetle here in Michigan. Collected something like 300 of them in one season. Another really favorite bug of Michigan is kind of anything that I find remarkable. Bulbocerasoma is a tiny little beetle about the size of the head of a pin. That gets me all ginned up. But I'm looking for things for my dead bug collection. I'm still a dead bug collector. Someone says, never knew those species were in Michigan. One of the things that happens is that people don't know what's out there until they figure out a way to cut across its life cycle. Dung beetles are attracted to dung. They're particularly attracted to pig dung. They're also attracted to human dung. If you can gag your way through using that, recommend you use your own, not someone else's. There are bacteria in other people's dung you don't want anywhere near you.
It's kind of weirder if you ask someone else.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
It's not like it's not weird if you're doing it yourself. And you want to use personal protection equipment. Take all the necessary precautions. If you get a good season, you can bring in Phineas and a number of other Latin names that escape me at the moment. There's a lot of beetles that are attracted to dung and setting out a dung trap, which again is something you need to apply for a permit if you're going to leave it, but you would apply with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. See what they say about it. Phineas is an interesting one. Some of the stuff that comes into lights. Geotrupes. Thank you, Alan. Geotrupes. That's another one that comes into dung. And other rotten stuff. Rotten mushrooms, rotten feathers, all kinds of nasty smelling carrion. Basically, if it gags you, there's a lot of insects that like it. So those are some of my favorites. I'm trying to think if there's a favorite that I would enjoy keeping alive here in Michigan. Some of the little forest roaches are pretty interesting.
Lucanus are nice. I like the
Yeah.
things that I use to watch the seasons pass. So there's the Pronolopus imparis flight, the false honey ants in early spring. So I like that because it's an early spring day, sign that there's a good warm spring day. I like seeing the Lucanus. It's a sign of the first hot evening, usually in May or June. Lucanus placidus flies, and then fall the big mellows, the oil beetles. I like seeing those too.
Okay.
Usually it's not, there's things that you kind of keep track of where you are through the seasons by what's flying around or what you're finding.
Big Saturniid moths.
Mm-hmm.
We have things here like Eocles imperialis, which is absolutely stunning. Huge, beautiful lemon yellow moth. Magnificent thing.
The Cecropias.
Cecropias.
Cecropias are a very Michigan thing.
Absolutely gorgeous. Tennyson writes Lucanus maizama. The only cool things within a half hour of me. We get Lucanus maizama in Arizona. A pseudo-Lucanus, it used to be called. Get that at Lights. We had such a busy season in 2017 in Madeira Canyon. We were buried in beetles, and at one point, Chrysina bayeri crawled up my leg, and I about had a heart attack. Chrysina bayeri is pretty large. It's larger than the end of a grown man's thumb, and legs everywhere. Hooks, spines. That was. Tennyson says, I find them at parks out here in northern Utah. I don't think you find bayeri in northern Utah.
Oh, I think it might have been the Lucanus.
Oh, the Lucanus maizama. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, what have you got?
For favorite?
No. Yeah, for favorite.
Oh, what do I have to say? Oh,
yes,
for
somebody
favorite.
said, and Kyle.
For favorites, I think I can't really pick just one. Again, I like seeing some things throughout this. I like seeing the false honey ants, the Pronolopus in March and early spring. I really love seeing the dogbane leaf beetles. That's like a late May, June thing, right around the same time as the Canis placidus, right around the time of Parkoblatta pennsylvanica. I like seeing cave crickets over the summer, Sulophyllus. And then into fall, you get the oil beetles, the mellows. You get the, what's that one? The black locust borer, the longhorn on goldenrods and stuff like that.
Yep.
I like seeing the full-size worker bumblebees come out, the Bombus impatiens and Gryciocalis and all of that. Hawk moths. Midas flies. I really like Midas flies a lot too.
Don't get a lot of those.
Yeah. They, when I have mulch piles, almost always one on a mulch pile for some reason. See about getting you some. Oh yeah, I would love to work with Mazama. I have Elaphis and Placidus. I found 4 larvae while I was digging around my yard in September, or maybe it was October, and I brought them indoors. I'm going to cool them in a couple weeks as they look like they're late L3, and see if I can actually get some adults to emerge from those and actually reproduce in captivity. But yeah, I want to work with Mazama. Oh, actually, I want to work with all the U.S. Lucanus eventually. For Alan, I see. That's okay. Maybe you'll catch enough to share you'll get enough to share with the class. So, but yeah, any other wrap up questions or anything anyone else can think of? Otherwise, I think we may bring things to a close after I drop some news.
Yes, Kyle has bombs to drop.
So any other questions? Favorite moth in Michigan?
Oh, hard to pick. The big Saturniids are good, but
Cecropias are pretty good.
Probably the favorite sphinx is the grapevine sphinx. That's a beautiful moth with an elaborate green pattern. It's a very handsome thing. And there's a moth in Arizona that has kind of the same pattern, but it's bright pink. Someone says, I like Luna moths. Can't go wrong.
Isabella tiger moths.
Isabella moths are beautiful. Can't go wrong with a Luna moth, though. Freshly emerged Luna moth. It's delicious.
Delicious.
Was I not supposed to eat that?
I don't know if
Luna
they'd
moth?
still have chemicals in them from feeding on walnut.
Ooh, tips on catching gymnotina.
Oh boy.
The only time I ever saw gymnotina in any numbers was when I was camping, and there were some flying around the tips of the branches of some of the Mexican blue oak that I was camping under, and other than that, it's really hit or miss.
You had that story you told me about a friend in a parking lot.
Yeah, that was another event with gymnotina. Very, very long time ago, a friend said that he had gone to, what was that canyon in the Huachucas?
Box Canyon?
No, it's not Box Canyon. It's in the Huachucas. There's a
Miller
nature
Canyon.
conservancy
Okay.
up there. Anyway, he walked outside of a bed and breakfast, and there were gymnotina hovering at chest height in the parking lot. There was about half a dozen of them, and he'd never seen anything like it. But it's another one of these sort of one-off events. You got to be Arizona. Speaking of dung beetles, Arizona is a really fabulous place to look for dung beetles. There's a mess load of beautiful dung beetles, but you want to be careful of having misadventures out there, like the friend of mine who decided he was going to be clever and loaded up a pastry bag with pig dung, because a pastry bag is what the pastry chef uses to squeeze out little flowers on cakes and stuff like that. And he thought, well, this will be great because I'll just load up this pastry bag with pig dung, and then I can just squeeze it into these little cups. Problem is that pigs eat a lot of stuff, including wood chips.
Oh, no.
And one of the wood chips jammed. Yeah, he sees this coming. One of the wood chips jammed in the nozzle of the pastry bag. So it's full of pig dung, and it's hot. And the fellow doing this he was a fairly robust fellow, nice and girthy, wearing a t-shirt, and also perspiring fairly heavily in the Arizona heat. And instead of stopping, he gave the pastry bag a harder squeeze to get the dung out, and of course the nozzle came off the pastry bag, and the pig dung went all over his shirt, which was the only shirt he had in his sweatiness.
In his sweatiness.
So think about how you want to handle that. Someone writes, their cousin nearly died from a caterpillar poisoning. Christine and I have experience with caterpillar poisoning. There are caterpillars in Arizona that have stinging spines, and the pain can last for weeks. We brushed up against some caterpillars that were on oak trees and didn't realize they were there, and the spines got us, and it was like getting a nail from a nail gun into your hand, and the pain just throbbed for a long time. That was nice. Think about where you're putting your hands in Arizona.
You know, I think somewhere, I don't know where it is, I still have a scar from when I had Io moth caterpillars.
No.
And I was like, let's see how this feels.
Oh,
And
no.
we found out how it felt.
There's literature that can tell you how stuff feels. You don't
Yeah.
always have to put everything in your mouth.
I also, well, on that note, I also found out they can't sting until after the third instar because I was licking the little groups of caterpillars to see if they would do anything. I don't know what I was on back then.
I'm just going to let that go.
That was 2011, I think it was. Something in the
Dagger
drinking
balls.
water, maybe.
Oh, you're blaming the drinking water. You know, I think it may be something
But
in the
now I
DNA.
know, until the fourth instar, they do not sting. I figured this is the most sensitive part of my body that I felt like affording at that time to them.
Just saying, if you had been stung on your tongue, it would have... That's a bad part to be disabled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You need that.
yeah.
Yeah. You know, find something like an elbow or something you don't use every
Yeah.
second
Well, that
of
was
the
with
day.
the adults because it's like okay, or with the larger larvae, it's like okay, I figured this is past the point. Like I know they're gonna sting me, but what's it gonna feel like? And then I found out what it felt like.
Yeah, it feels like nettle. There's a plant in Arizona
Ah, yes.
that goes beyond nettle. It's called devil's nettle. And there's a reason it's called devil's nettle. If you brush up against it, you'll remember that for the rest of your life. No matter how long you live or how melted your brain gets with old age, devil's nettle is an experience to be avoided, and the plant looks like it came from hell, by the way. So, yeah, that's a good plant to
There
avoid.
was, I can say from trekking through Devil's Nettle, it didn't seem to affect me. There was a plant, well, it affected me as much as like stinging nettle would, but there was a plant on the second Arizona trip on the roadside between Portal and Rodeo, New Mexico. And I think I looked it up, and it might actually be an undescribed species or undescribed variety of this plant. I think it was called snakebite plant. And beautiful flowers.
Sound good.
Beautiful flowers that were like a pink, like a nice mix of pastels with some nice fruity colors to them. Had a lot of bugs on them. But I brushed up against one, and my body part wanted to die. And the wanting to die did not stop for at least a half an hour after I had touched it. It was a beautiful plant. I wish I could go back to that patch. I wish I knew when it would be blooming again so I could collect
So
seeds.
you can collect seeds
Yes,
and plant them in your
and
yard,
plant them in your yard, yes.
so that people will leave you
Much
alone.
like I did with Devil's Claw and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
I had a good I tried eating Devil's Claw. You can eat the seed pods before they're ripened. I found out that I don't know if it was because I'd stored some of them in the fridge for too long in cold water. I don't know if that was the way that made them taste better or not doing that made them taste better. But have you ever eaten a burning tire before?
My last burning tire was a couple of months ago.
Okay.
A burning tire sandwich.
It tasted exactly as you would anticipate a burning tire to taste. At least the ones that apparently I did not collect at the proper stage or did not store properly.
Or put in your mouth.
Or
which
put
you
in my
shouldn't
mouth.
Do things that begin with the name devils.
The devil's lettuce.
Devils anything in your mouth.
Deviled eggs.
So, nope.
Jake says, I missed first grade. I feel you, Satch, felt like pepper spray when I got sprayed by approximately 50 anisomorpha. Is it an urtica? I don't know if devil's nettle is in the genus urtica. I think it's in that family.
Devil's nettle is in the genus Nidoscolus.
Okay. That sounds almost worse than the
Almost
common
worse.
name.
Nidos is Old Latin for stinging nettle.
Okay.
And the Nidaria are the jellyfish.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Makes sense.
Nothing good here. Nothing good.
Nothing
Keep
good
your distance,
to
get a
know.
long lens, take a photograph, and back away.
All right. Well, any wrap-up questions for Kim? I guess while I wait for some of those to pop up, I'll go into what I wanted to talk about. And before we had our technical issues, I was going to start the stream with that. But a paper has come out showing has come out showing phylogenetic relationships between numerous blattids, blatted cockroaches, and among these discoveries, which are supported by molecular and morphological evidence, is that Shelfordella lateralis, or the red runner or Turkestan cockroaches, are actually in a very close clade with Paraplaneta americana, the American cockroach, and those are both grouped out from other Paraplaneta, what we were calling Paraplaneta before, in the Australasian cockroach, the smoky brown, and the brown cockroach, all form a group, and that Paraplaneta, as it currently is actually very polyphyletic and will probably be dissolved. On top of that reveal with the Americana, Paraplaneta japonica seems to form a clade with Archiblatta and Derapeltis, meaning that one of the most cold-tolerant cockroaches in the world is closely related to cockroaches that are found in some of the hottest places in the world, and that's yes, Paraplaneta missionary. You may very soon find yourself having to rename or rebrand if the lines are drawn differently, but it seems that at least I think that Paraplaneta Paraplaneta best genus. Well, you might have to rebrand because it might just be it looks like Shelfredella lateralis will be subsumed into that, and I think Periplaneta americana is the oldest, one of the oldest Latin names. It was in Linnaeus's original publications and such. That means that Shelfredella lateralis, I think, will become Periplaneta lateralis unless it has an older synonym, but it will probably be in the genus Periplaneta, and those other Periplaneta species will be changed into something else. I don't know if they'll use an old synonym or if they'll erect something new for them. And you're welcome for the email about the high fat content roaches. Again, it's kind of speculation just based on the amount of fat bodies that they have, but they should just change the names of all the domestic roaches because they make no sense. That'll be something. I think Blatta orientalis makes sense, but that was another thing is Blatta is within the group with the Shelfredella and Periplaneta americana. So I guess really the big thing there is tips on Eublaberus posticus. I'll touch on that in a moment. Nidoscola stimulosus is a great plant. Then you got the stimulosus in there. Certainly is stimulating. Real quick notes on Eublaberus posticus. They are from very moist, arguably wet bat caves, and so they like very high humidity. So you should be giving them that in some form, whether it's limited ventilation or keeping them very wet or close to wet. That's what they really like. There are some pictures on Google Images of bat caves that have Eublaberus posticus, and they're very wet. They look very gross. They look like it's just all bat poop everywhere. And they can actually be found in the same cave systems as Eublaberus distanti, but they are separated by their niche preferences. Distanti is found in the drier parts of the caves, and posticus are found in the more humid parts. And I missed a big chunk of a comment there, unfortunately, if you want to resend that. Whatever the most recent comment was. Again, we kind of see them as they pop up on screen because we are currently streaming off of my phone due to excessive technological errors on the laptop as we sat down to stream. If you'd like an answer to that promptly, if you don't want to send an email to it, feel free to send it again here. Otherwise, that was the bombshell. Is Periplaneta americana is its own entity compared to the other supposed Periplanetas, and we'll see how the lines get redrawn in the next couple of months. I refuse to acknowledge this heresy. Just become a Blattidae missionary. That would be good. Ever since the Ectobias changed, I just call them all micro roaches now. Yeah, that was the last fiasco. I hope there aren't any more. I don't know if I can take it. I'll have to keep rewriting the guide constantly, apparently. So, all right, last call for any questions or comments to be read. We will wrap the stream up very shortly here. And I would also like to take this time to thank him and Christine for joining us for an eventful guest live stream. In mycology, taxonomy changes you. Show bug. We will show bug next week some eggs. It is an antagonizing line that is frequently uttered when people want me to show them some bugs, but not tonight. Next, show bug indeed. I have some good ideas for bugs to show next week, actually. I will have to make some notes and maybe even do, I think next week may even be a basement tour video upload. I have to see how things go. So, keep any Periplaneta species. Thanks for the stream, Kim, and thanks for advising the trips I've gone on with Kyle.
Well, you're welcome. Tried to keep you alive.
It worked.
You worked so far.
This will not be the last that we will see of you.
One hopes.
One hopes.
Getting up there.
But perhaps do a more herpetology-centric stream in the future. Perhaps even with some snakes or something.
Perhaps with some show snake.
Yeah, with some show snakes.
Which
could be very very fun. I think that would be good. We schedule that for a future date. So, thank you everybody for coming to this special Roach Wiggle, and I guess until next week, as usual, may your cultures ever be bountiful, and I will see you all next Thursday. Thanks again for joining us. So, I think this is end streaming.